Oz Network, in August, we like to celebrate a little film called The Room. We did a recap of it way back in 2018, and so in love with that film did we fall that we said every year on that date we would do a special episode to celebrate it. And today, I'm so excited that we are able to bring somebody from that film on the show today. Not obviously talk about The Room, which we will of course get to, but a brand new film that he is not only in, but wrote, directed it, and is about to bring it to Australia for the very first time, as well as having a screening of The Room, a Q&A, and just get to mingle with the fans of himself, the film, and everything else in between that has made The Room such a cult following for 20 years. We are celebrating 20 years of it in 2023, believe it or not. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome to the Oz Network, the one, the only, Mr. Greg Sestero. And I've got to do it. Sorry, Greg. Oh, hi, Greg.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I haven't been down to Australia since 2018.
Wow.
And it's such a treat to come down there. The people are just so much fun. The audiences really get it. And then they taught me an expression. I don't know if this is Australian or British, but they're like, yeah, man, you take the piss really well, which kind of cracked me up. But yeah, Sydney especially. Sydney's kind of, it feels really comfortable because it kind of reminds me a little bit of San Francisco, which is where I'm from. And it's just a really good time. And the Hayden Orpheum is one of the most beautiful theaters I've been to traveling the world. So just a really great house. And yeah, no, I'm stoked to finally come back to Sydney. Not only to obviously, they do The Room really hard there, but obviously to show them a new horror film. Because the last time I was there in 2018, I told them my goal, the next thing I wanted to do was make a horror film. So got a chance to make it. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. So finally, all these years later, I get to come back.
Which I love this passion for horror that you have, and sort of in the lead up to this interview, watching some interviews you've done about it. The film, of course, called Miracle Valley, which I know many people here are very excited to see. So this is always something that I think you wanted to do, wasn't it? A horror film.
Yeah, I grew up loving, like, one of my favorite films was Psycho. I used to live right down the street from the Halloween house, the original Michael Myers house.
Wow.
And so it's just always been something that I feel like seeing with a crowd, especially, is a great time. So having shown The Room and seeing that crowd, how interactive they are, I just felt like making like a 70s grindhouse interactive horror film would be something that would be a lot of fun.
You went to Arizona, I believe, to sort of research this. It's about cults, and something which you two have also been very much into. So what was it about Arizona? Was it just the desert? Was that something where a lot of cults have been there? And kind of what was that experience being out there to write the film, and then obviously transitioning that into putting it all together?
So it's a really, where I was staying is a really cool ranch where they used to shoot old Westerns. And I went down there to relax and do some writing and research, and I just stumbled upon this abandoned church that was sitting out there in the middle of the desert. And I thought, first of all, I thought this is a really intriguing filming location. And then the more I learned about its history, I was like, wait, this whole story is a great backdrop for a horror film. And I've always been fascinated by cults, and I was like, okay, I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to study it. And I had this incredible, like, really cool setup. And so I thought, I can film this whole movie right here. So while I was writing the script, it was cool because I could see everything come together and what I had access to. So I sort of tailored the script right into the story. And I wrote the script. Once I got the idea, it's sort of about a blood trafficking cult. So think of, they traffic people based on their blood type, and then turn that into something very, very bizarre, which the movie gets into. So I wrote the script in about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, and then we made the movie like 4 months later and shot that in like 3 or 4 weeks. So
wow.
It all came together really fast, and it was just cool to be filming a story about a cult right in its backyard.
Is it one of these ones that when you are in that situation that I'm sure you're hearing sort of real life stories, or you've read all these sort of stories, that Do you get a bit superstitious the way you're filming it? Because there's all these great films, you know, The Exorcist and these sort of films where sort of, like, you know, life imitates art or art imitates life almost kind of that way. Do you sort of get a bit concerned on that side of things when you're filming a movie like this?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to just kind of tie in all the fun elements that I love from horror films. So I grabbed like 20 Blu-rays of DVDs of movies that I loved, you know, The Hills Have Eyes, Breakdown, Don't Breathe, The Exorcist, and just sort of watched a little bit of those every morning with my morning coffee and was like, what do I like about these movies? Why are they rewatchable? Is it the score? Is it the characters? Is it the comedy? And so I just kind of let those soak in. I'm like, I'm going to try to do an homage as much as I can to those movies that I love that, you know, you don't know where they're going. There's twists, there's comedy. One of my favorite things about horror is sort of the comedy that comes um, out of the ridiculousness. So we we just kind of followed that path and just tried to make something fun. So I didn't get too worried about the cult coming after me, at least not yet.
Not yet, exactly, not yet. I love that idea of, you know, waking up, having a coffee, and just putting on The Exorcist or something like that. I mean, everyone's all about watching horror movies at night alone. Like, I don't know, watch it first thing in the morning, wake up, put on a horror movie. Why not?
It was a really liberating way to do it because where I was living, it was in the middle of nowhere. So if you watch a horror movie at night, you are a sitting duck because I'd look out my windows and it was just pitch black, but anybody out there could see in very clearly. So I was very concerned at night. I kept thinking, hey, if I don't wake up, this is the way to go out. And so watching them in the morning was a little bit better.
Is it hard to not get into cliches of horror movies? It's a genre where there are so many cliches that people fall into the traps of. But do you want to kind of live up to some of those cliches, or do you want to avoid them when you make a horror movie?
I think you find so you're inspired by a few different horror movies, and then you find your own groove. Your story kind of finds its characters, and then you really need to keep the audience guessing. And I think you really need to do that in an authentic way. And in my movie, my character is a bird photographer. He's a nature photographer, and he's in search of this rare bird that you can't find anywhere. That he believes if he gets a photo of it, he can sell it for millions of dollars. So the guy's a bit of an idiot, but he takes it so seriously. And once I got locked in on the whole bird story and the cult story, the story just kind of stumbled, kind of went along, and then you find these little moments that when you're in it, you can create those twists. So the crowd is expecting a cliche, or they're expecting something to happen, and then something totally different happens. And I think that's where they start to become more invested. If a character like dies all of a sudden, like in Psycho, then they're in. But you got to do it in a way where it actually works for your story, or it works. It's almost like you have to stumble across the twist as you're writing it. Like it's not pre-planned. And so with this movie, there's a couple moments that happen like that I had no idea when I was writing it. They just sort of invented themselves. And that's when I think writing a horror movie becomes fun. Because if the cliches will get people watching and then commenting, but then if you surprise them out of those cliches, then I think they trust you more.
And does that make it then for the actors and as an actor yourself that as it's developing while you're filming a film that can bring a more genuine performance from the actors because they're learning at the same time rather than knowing how this is all going to turn out?
Yeah, that's one of the things I had a lot of fun with directing this movie is you notice actors start to know what's coming, and they almost don't pay attention to the truth that's happening in the scene. Like they just say the dialogue. So I told some of the actors to go up and say something totally different, or there was an object, for example, in one scene that was very valuable and no one was guarding it. Like if it was really that case, people would be much more careful. So I told the actor just go up and break it if they're not paying attention. And they did that, and it changed the whole outcome of the scene. Reactions were better. So I said from that point on, with every scene, I'm gonna try to have fun and really surprise people and have each scene try to take on some truth.
Your first film that you directed, as you just sort of touched on there, I mean, enjoy the experience enough that it's something that you might want to pursue a little bit more, the directing side of things?
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I mean, writing is probably what I enjoy the most because you get to sit with the story and create the characters and research. It's just such a you're so enveloped in what you're doing, and I've always enjoyed that. But writing and directing is also very rewarding because then you're bringing that story to life. Because when you're writing, especially when you're writing in the location of where you're filming, you're almost directing it as you're writing it. And so I'm working right now on a UFO abduction movie that I'm scouting and writing
Very excited for this
called
one.
Forbidden Sky, and it's become it's become a really crazy experience. But I hope to do more of that. Maybe I think it's a lot to star, direct, and write and all that. I think maybe do a little less acting and try to focus on the story and the characters.
Because I love that story that you've told many times about when you were a kid, how much you wanted to be a writer by writing a sequel to Home Alone and basically sending it off to John Hughes, and that sort of sparked that fire. So I guess it's kind of when you have something like that as a kid and maybe life takes you in a different direction, you've still got that with you. You wrote The Disaster Artist. We saw obviously what happened with that. So that writing passion that you obviously had as such a young boy has always kind of remained.
Yeah, I feel like storytelling is sort of what lights you up when you first start, whether it's we see that movie and we're trying to understand what it does for us. Sometimes it's obviously music that people really respond to, but storytelling for me is at the base of everything I've loved. So if you can just um, tap into that and write and just for fun, just start off writing stories for fun, then to me, I'm doing it right. So with Miracle Valley, again, I went out with just the agenda, the goal of making something that would be fun to watch with a crowd.
It must be exciting then too, when you can come to Australia for say a screening of The Room and meet those sort of fans, but to bring something like this because it obviously brings it to a new audience. The film's been out for a little bit, of course, in your neck of the woods in the States, but to bring it internationally, literally the other side of the world, and kind of see people's reactions all over again from that beginning, which you've obviously been experiencing since the film's been out.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest rewards when you make a film. The biggest reward is getting to show it to an audience in a theater like the Orpheum. It's a huge reward. I know we did that in 2018 with Best Friends, but it's yeah, the Australian audience has supported now for supported our films for 13 years, 14 years now, which is wild. So it's just it's really cool again to bring something new and see their reaction to it.
Now,
Hopefully it's hopefully, worst case it's the second best worst movie ever made. We'll see.
I like that concept. I mean, it is obviously that section where you're going to have a bunch of people who are showing up for The Room, and they're there to see that and there to meet you for that. But is it a case of horror fans in general who are maybe listening to this and are in Sydney and just want to see a horror film instead, and maybe what's The Room? And maybe they're the two people in Australia that have never seen The Room as well. That maybe they're kind of the tack-ons from loving this film.
Definitely. Yeah, I think again, horror. I mean, I'm a huge horror fan, so whatever I'd make would be the goal to give those fans a fun ride as well. And we got into Fright Fest UK, which is a
Nice.
great festival, and people like they really dug it there. They said it had a little bit of Midsummer, a little bit of Hereditary, Wicker Man. So it's in that vein of cult style films. And we shot it on Ari, so it's got a really cool style to it. So if you love horror movies, it's a quick one. It's 88 minutes, and we shot it again on location in Arizona, Lake Powell. So it's got a really cool style to it, and I think the Aussie audiences will appreciate it for what it is.
I love this concept of this UFO movie that you're obviously working on. Have you thought, given the time you've spent in Australia, of doing a movie here? I mean, we've got vast outback, we've got vast areas where there could be horror mixed with UFO. Maybe you could combine Miracle Valley and the UFO movie together as sort of like some sort of franchise and do it in the outback.
I would love that. Yeah, I want to get down and see as much of kind of the country of Australia as I can. All the cities I've gone to are obviously awesome. But I would love to, yeah, just discover more and even involve maybe some Aussie actors, Aussie crew, and yeah, do something down there. I think that's definitely a great idea. I'm sure there are UFOs down there too, right?
Absolutely, of course. I'm from
They're probably all about the
Yeah, different. They've got spiders on them, and all those kind of different creature feature things and that sort of stuff that you maybe don't have there. But I'm from Tasmania, Greg, and we're a small isolated island. We've got large patches of wilderness that are barely untouched. So like we've got some great parts there for filming, great mysteries going on out there. So come to Tassie and check that out there and film it there.
Absolutely.
It kind of
We're
works.
on to something.
And just before we sort of touch a little bit more on the room, Greg, in terms of people who maybe can't make the screening on Sunday in Sydney, is there a plan to have it spread out, screen elsewhere in Australia, can catch it on streaming? Sort of where can people sort of catch it if they can't make it on Sunday?
Yeah, it's it's going to be on Blu-ray as well, and it'll be on streaming, I think, coming up pretty soon. So on Prime, if you have Tubi, I think it'll be on Tubi. I'm not sure if that's in Australia yet, but yeah, it'll be coming to streaming this year.
Exciting. I'm sure people are looking forward to it. As I touched in the intro, 20 years, Greg, since The Room. It's ridiculous to think that this is the 20th anniversary of the film that just keeps on giving. We have loved it every single time we have covered it on this show. How is it now 20 years on, obviously with everything you've experienced with it, to think that people are still talking about this now and people are still going to show up in droves on Sunday in Australia to kind of watch a film and enjoy it in the best way possible with an audience who are going to enjoy it the whole time?
Yeah, I've sort of, just accepted it that it's this unique movie that brings people a lot of joy. I met someone on the plane today that said, "Hey, my husband and I are together because of The Room." And I've heard
Wow.
that many, many times. And I'm like, hey, we all want to make amazing films. We all want to make movies that we grew up loving, like Back to the Future and Star Wars and all these things. But if a movie like The Room really brings people together, brings them that much joy, like that's a huge thing. So I've stopped trying to figure out, is it bad movie, good movie? I've just like, it's something that people love. And that's at the end of the day, what you hope to make, what you hope to be a part of. And I've come to appreciate The Room. And again, the fact that brings people together, I think it's that shock value. I think it's so much fun to show people this movie and see their jaw drop and ask all those questions and be like, how did this get made? Why? It's just some of those things. It does something that amazing movies do. It's just in a different way. And 20 years later, I've just kind of come to appreciate it. And to me, like if the fans love it and they want to show up and they're not sick of it and they are still celebrating it, then I should be doing the same thing.
I got to ask, how do people get together because of The Room? Is it just they've gone to a screening and they've just met then, or do they go to Comic Cons and dress up as Tommy and Mark, and then all of a sudden it happens? I mean, like it's kind of how does this generally work? What's
All
the
kinds of, oh
story?
yeah, all kinds of ways. They'll meet on the dating profile and they have a picture with Tommy and I.
Wow.
They'll show The Room on a second date, kind of work out the awkwardness, and it's just a great icebreaker, it's a conversation starter, and we all kind of need that, and it's just amazing that they would go to The Room, and I think The Room's a really good test because if you guys can laugh at it and talk about it, then it means you have a good sense of humor.
We do a month every year on the show where we do Bad Movie Month. So you take four movies that are considered, the worst of all time, and got to The Room, and it's one of these ones that we love about the month where generally we're going into these expecting them to be bad, and you often find some of these movies, it's like, well, this is bad, but it's enjoyable bad. Like we did Geely, and it's like, well, there's a good movie in this. It's just maybe kind of crap the way they put it together. We watched The Room, and straight away we were just like, this is just the most incredible thing we have ever seen. Like, yes, this is shit, but it's not shit as in bad shit. This is the best shit we've ever seen, and why we celebrate it. Do you love hearing that from people when they tell you that kind of story about how maybe they're bad film aficionados? They, instead of watching the Oscar nominated movies every year, they watch the Razzie ones. And this is the one, as famously it's been called, the Citizen Kane of bad movies.
I think it comes down to entertainment, and I think a really bad movie can be just as entertaining as a really good one. And I think it's just people are looking for something different. Over the holidays with my dad, we watched a movie on Netflix called Welcome to Sudden Death, and 20 minutes in, we were busting up laughing and thinking like the fight scenes were like, dude, next night we watched it again. So I was like, okay, I get it. There's an appeal here that brings you a certain amount of joy and entertainment, and it's like, hey, it takes all kinds of movies to entertain people, and it's like cool. If this movie makes people feel the way I did when I watched Welcome to Sudden Death, fucking awesome. And then I was reading reviews about it because I'm like, I never heard about this movie. And someone said the acting is worse than The Room. And I'm like, oh shit, this movie got compared to The Room. So I just think, again, movies that get talked about 10, 20 years later, there's got to be more there than just a bad movie. There's got to be a mystery, a mystique, funny characters. And that's just what The Room has. It's just an anomaly.
Do you still get surprised by questions that fans may have for you? So a Q and a event like you're going to have in Sydney, I'm sure you get the majority of questions that you've always been asked, but is there ever always like a pearl that someone will throw out to you and you'll be like, huh, I've never thought of that, or oh, I've never been asked that before?
Yeah, definitely. It's usually when it comes to they've read the book and their real story. I think that's when they've kind of done a deep dive on the personal life. I think that's when they always ask something that's intriguing or pushing it up in a different way, or they've read an interview that talks about something that's not like easy to find. Usually is ones that I'm like, oh, good question.
Do you find that Australian audiences are different to American audiences, Canadian audiences, English audiences when it comes to watching The Room based on sort of different cultures in different areas? They might interpret things a little bit differently.
It travels really well. I mean, I was in, Eastern Europe. I was in the Baltics. I've been in Germany. And they really enjoy it. They even seek it out. So it's
Wow.
just a movie again that defies any sort of barrier. It's just a very unique movie that surprisingly travels the world really well. I mean, I think there was a screening in Singapore and Japan, China, and people respond to it. So it's just a movie that sort of defies any barriers. It just goes through and steamrolls and finds the audience.
What is the weirdest fan interaction you've ever had?
You know what? For the most part, I don't know, it's weird. I think they're just really passionate. Like when I was in Australia last time, someone flew down from I don't know if it was Thailand or
Wow.
Malaysia. They came all the way down to attend the screening, and I just like it's incredible the depths that people go, the tattoos, the costumes. They're just really supportive, and so for the most part, it's been very very positive.
I do love it when you see. I saw Tommy shared one the other day, and looking through your Instagram, sort of when people will say just have like a license plate, and it'll say like, "Oh, hi, Mark," or something like that, and just kind of the things like that. You mentioned tattoos. I mean, how many tattoos generally? Like, is this a constant thing at Q and A? So that lift up the shirt, like I've got an old hi, Mark tattooed on my chest or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just yeah, my signature was tattooed a few times, and
Wow.
um, the "You're Tearing Me Apart," oh hi Mark. It's just something that again people are they're just it just brings them a lot of joy, and it's cool to see.
That's crazy. It must be odd in some weird way though to all of a sudden just see your name, your signature tattooed on someone. Like, I mean, that's massive fandom right then and there to get a tattoo of a signature or somebody's name.
Yeah, no, no, it's the passion is what's driven this movie for 20 years.
It is. It really. It's just one of those ones. It's kind of like a Rocky Horror Picture Show, isn't it? Where you've got these midnight screenings and people dress up and obviously go out there. I'm really intrigued to see how many people are going to be dressing up on Sunday. What is there like a besides some of the obvious costumes, have people sort of gone out of their way to bring a unique take on one of the characters or something from the movie to turn into a costume at one of these screenings?
Yeah, someone showed up dressed as Johnny. It was a girl, and she brought a red dress and was like humping the red dress during the screening, and even brought like a dog. So
Wow.
again, it's like you see this movie, you never expect people to want to dress up and be those characters. It just amazes me that you just don't know in films, like when you make a movie, what its life is going to be.
Absolutely crazy to think of that. Wow, absolutely amazing. My co-host Colin obviously couldn't be here with us today, but he gave me a couple of questions to kind of put to you, which I'm actually intrigued for a couple of these ones, particularly the part in the movie where Mark randomly shaves, or the shaving section, the beard, the non-beard. Was that in the script? How did that sort of just happen with the beard and then the non-beard and then the shave?
that had sort of come up as we were filming. I think Tommy halfway through was like, let's I think, you need to shave, it'll be more baby face. And so sort of the scene was sort of created so he could call me baby face. So it wasn't in the script. It just had come into its own as we were filming. And I saw the beard as sort of like my disguise. And when I shaved it, it was sort of a traumatic, but I'm glad. I think it works well for the film.
Do you prefer people when they dress up in you in costume with beard or no beard?
I think if you wear the red shirt, you got to have a little bit of a beard, but
Yeah.
it goes both ways.
Yep, absolutely agree. Colin also asks, do you believe that Claudette definitely recovered from breast cancer?
Yeah, I think she did. She survived.
Good. All right. Glad. That's
Thank God.
burning question that we've had for about 20 years, I think, really, to get to the bottom of that. One thing, before I let you go, Greg, at the time of recording this is a slight tangent, but you'll understand where I'm going with this. James Gunn has just jumped at the helm of the DCEU and has sort of announced a whole slate of films coming out in DC. And Tommy basically messaged James on Twitter and said, DM me, to which James Gunn liked that tweet. So a few fans are getting a bit excited that the Nerdist videos that you guys did a few years ago with him as the Joker and you as Batman could come into reality. Are you waiting for a phone call from James right now to maybe be involved in the DCEU? And is Tommy on board? Do you think we're going to have the next Joker officially as Tommy?
Hey, you never know. I'm friends with Sean Gunn, James' brother. We used to
Wow.
be neighbors. And I know James liked the Disaster Artist a lot, so you never know.
Hey, I love these connections. It could work out. You never know how it's going to play out. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Greg, before we let you go, mate, of course, this Sunday for people in Sydney who are listening, if they do want to come along to the Hayden Orpheum and see not only Miracle Valley, but of course The Room. It's all kicking off from 6 o'clock. Miracle Valley is shown. There'll be a Q&A with yourself between that and The Room to chat about that. And of course, if people want to show up a little bit earlier, you're having a meet and greet autograph session there as well. Tickets are available online, and we are so looking forward to having you back in the country, Greg. You got a long flight ahead of you, so we really do very much appreciate you jumping on this chat for us, because obviously a lot of travel, but we are so looking forward to seeing Miracle Valley and seeing The Room with the people who love The Room the most, the fans, right?
Always, yep. And we'll be there. There'll be spoons, and I'll make sure to be doing my best Mark and Johnny impression.